Welcome to the Blueprints to Buildings podcast. I'm your host, Glen Palmer, and on this show, we interview the movers and shakers in the world of property development and real estate. So, this episode is powered by a PropTech innovation that's flipping the script on how developments are visualized and sold. No outdated 3D models, no guesswork, just a faster route from concept to completion, often cutting 8 to 12 weeks off projection timelines. Want to see it in action? Reach out to me on LinkedIn at Glen Palmer Secure or check out the show notes below. So on today's show, I have the pleasure of interviewing Stephen Duggan. He is an internationally seasoned construction executive and managing director at BHA Construction in Ireland. Known for delivering over 3 billion euros in projects across 3 continents, he has a reputation as a systems-driven leader who makes construction predictable, profitable, and scalable. Stephen, thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule. And of course, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
You're more than welcome. So let's dive right in. So, first question. If time travel became a reality and you had a chance to go back in time to when you first started your career, what would the advice that the person you are now give your younger self?
I think the number one quote that I've learned to live by is if you want to be successful at something, find someone who's achieved the success you're looking for and model what they do. I learned that from Tony Robbins much later in my career, and the importance of a mentor, to find mentors. And they don't always have to be one-on-one mentors, although that's fantastic if you do find it, through books, YouTube channels, social media, and to if you want to be really good at something, model what they've done. So find a mentor would be the number one thing. Second thing would be to take that sort of best practice and start to develop simple little systems and principles for how you do your daily work or how you go about doing things. And taking the best practice from those mentors and embedding it into how you do what you do. And the third one is, and I spoke to a group of students there a couple of weeks ago, and I talked about this to find your why. If you can connect, like construction's a tough business, it's a tough game. And oftentimes when you start, you don't really see the end result of that thing that you're doing. It's like a component in a much bigger piece of jigsaw.
Yeah.
But if you can have a clear understanding of your why. So it took me 20 years to understand my why, and that's to deliver affordable housing at scale. And then, when you've got challenges with the utilities and the permits and the weather and the resources issue, you kind of remind yourself why you're doing it. And that's a huge driver for anyone in their career.
Yeah. I can't agree more. Finding your why is super, super important, and people sort of gloss over finding your why. But I think if you find your why, everything else falls into place because then you've got a reason why you are doing what you are doing. And if you keep on reminding yourself your why, when things go like you say, when things go a little bit awry and things aren't going the way that you planned, just thinking back to your why, it sort of puts things back into perspective. And I totally agree with you about mentoring as well. You need to find a mentor, someone who's been there, done that, and that can show you the ropes. I fully agree with that. And like you, I learned that a little bit later. I wish I learned that when I was younger.
Yeah.
But you've delivered major projects across Ireland, Africa, and the Middle East, and you're well known for your systems first approach. So, what's the biggest operational or commercial gap that you still see in today's construction industry? And how do robust systems actually close that?
Yeah, so I'm a passionate believer that the contract can actually be a management tool, and too often it's relied on when something's gone wrong. So I always talk about cause and effect. It's a well-known term in the construction industry, but in the construction industry, we're by our nature problem solvers. We want to fix things, we want to get involved. We're the masters of disaster, but that doesn't create capacity at scale. Like, so, if you want to build one house is easy, to build 500 or 1,000 is very hard because
Hmm.
the intricate interrelationship between all of the various stakeholders, and construction's a complicated game. Things are changing all the time. And I think if you have a philosophy and it's not one of taking positions or sides, it's like we're going to use this contract as a management tool, and we're going to make sure that the relationships between all of the various stakeholders are clearly defined, they're understood, and expectations are aligned. So whether that's,
Hmm.
what I need from you, the design team, in terms of information and when I need it by, or the decisions I need from the client and by when I need them by, and so forth and so on, from subcontractors and suppliers, and also the obligations of the contractor. And I think that sometimes contractors lose sight of the fact they're paid by the employer not just to deliver a building, but to manage that stakeholder relationship.
Yeah.
It's of no benefit to the client if you come along with a moral victory at the end and say, your building was delayed, but I'm right here and your design team is wrong,
Yeah.
or your nominated and selected subbies are the ones that cause the issue. So I really believe that setting the contract up in a way that all of these requirements and then embedding that into technology like a Procore, for example, or an online project delivery platform where the information flow is much more streamlined and seamless.
Yeah.
That's the big gap that I see is we're still way, way behind where we should be in terms of using the contract as actually many contracts are drafted to be, and that is a management tool.
Yeah. Excellent. And Ireland is dealing with high demand, capacity pressure, and the need for more predictable delivery models. From your perspective, what's the biggest bottleneck to improving program certainty in Ireland right now?
If I was to be honest, one thing I would think honestly, government entities, state and semi-state and government departments, I was building all over Africa for 13 or 14 years, and to build in Africa is tough.
Yeah.
Nigeria, Djibouti, Ethiopia, you've got resource issues, currency issues, you've got skills challenges. It's not easy. And I kind of romanticized what it would be like when I was back in Ireland, that you'd be able to push a button and your permits would spit out the other end, or push a button and all your utility connections would mysteriously arrive. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
As we
Yeah.
sit here today in Ireland, the uncertainty regarding the planning process is incredible. The ability of third party stakeholders to delay and frustrate planning applications. I mean, it's holding up, hundreds of thousands of units right around the country. And I'm not saying I'm not saying that third party stakeholders shouldn't have a say, but our system is archaic. It needs to be updated. Even
Yeah.
when it goes into the appeals system with what's called on board planola here, there's capacity constraints. There's capacity
Yeah.
constraints in the planning departments and in the appeal departments, and it prolongs everything. And then the ability of the utilities to cope with demand. We've got a entity here, Irish Water. As a developer, you often have to start your development before you have what's called your offer agreement, and
Hmm.
you're essentially starting without knowing if and when you're going to get connected,
Yeah.
which is a huge risk.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a
Same,
massive risk.
yeah, same with ESB, our electrical providers. There's capacity and grid constraints because of the rapid expansion, not only in housing, but especially data centers and pharma. It's put a huge pressure on the grid.
Yeah.
Um, that's on that side. Just generally in the in the project delivery side, like we're pretty much at 100% employment. Like if I put an ad up for an engineer or a site manager on LinkedIn, we won't get one application. It's that crazy. So I think we've got to, as an industry, start looking much younger. And for instance, I was in the colleges giving a talk to some students the other day, and
Hmm.
actually investing in the students, giving them summer jobs, giving them work placements, being a mentor and a guide to them so that we have engaged. Because one of the biggest problems universities and technical colleges are having is kids are not making it all the way through the degrees. We're
Yeah.
signing up 300 kids for construction management and maybe producing 100 out of that in fourth year. And that's
Wow.
that's that's going to be a huge crisis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do we deal with that crisis? Is it more education about teaching kids this is something that, this is a really good path to go down? Is it more talks at universities? Is it more talks at schools? How do we meet that bottleneck? Because I sit in a world where I see the issues in property, but I also see the issues in transport and HGV drivers. There is a major shortage. And now, obviously, in construction, there's going to be a major shortage. And it's finding that balance of getting them young people in and letting them know about what is available out there. Because a lot of it now is more, when I look at my youngster, my young nieces and nephews, it's all online. Everything
Mm.
is on online what they're doing, and they're not doing the constructions. They're not doing the labor sort of restricted things like your HGV drivers, like your contractors, your subcontractors, your builders, even plumbers and electricians. There's a shortage. So how would you approach the industry? Would you go and do more school talks? Would it be more university talks? How would you approach that?
I think, generally as an industry, we need to come together and think about it more and engage kids at school level. Because I mean, it's when you make your choice for your A levels or what we call the leaving certificate. I mean, that hardwires your future. And
Yeah,
industries like the legal profession or software, they're all romanticized. They're cool and sexy, whereas construction is seen as something different. We need to flip
mm,
that script. It's really cool what we do. We build things and you get to, you know, I had somebody visit from South Africa a couple of weeks ago, and as I drove over the bridge to the town where I live, I was pointing at all the buildings that I've been involved in constructing, you know, and it's selling the story that this is a career that, is constantly evolving, can take you around the world, is a very high-paying career if you're successful at it. And getting back to the trades, I mean, electricians are going to be the future millionaires, you know.
yeah,
That's
definitely.
that's the reality. And we're not
Yeah,
selling that story. We're not selling the industry early enough to kids. So getting into schools, especially talking in the universities and selling the vision of what your career can be, um,
yeah,
and getting involved. So as I say, giving them summer jobs and work placements and mentoring kids so that they actually do enter and stay in our industry. I think it's hugely important.
yeah, 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 yeah. And you've spoken a lot about stakeholder alignment and clarity of obligations. So, how big a role do you think technology, like digital twins, visualization tools, or integrated project platforms, will play in reducing rework and smoothing out communication across all teams?
I think it's going to play a bigger and bigger role. We're bringing our business really forward in that regard. So we've chosen Procore, for example, as our main project communication and project management tool. It's not cheap. It's a big investment for a company of our size. We're a 60 million turnover business. And all of our project communication and stakeholder engagement happens within that. So right throughout the project's life cycle. So from our design team to our construction, all of the internal functions of our business operate. So for example, procurement happens through Procore, design information flow. And what we really need to do at the next phase of it now is embed all of our project controls and systems through Procore. And the big challenge with all of these tools is adaptation, getting actually
Yeah,
site teams to want to use them,
yeah.
to move away from checklists or pen and paper and actually want to integrate. And I'm not sure what the answer to that is. I think some of it's just kind of pig-headed determination to embed it in a business, selling the
Hmm.
benefit and showing it and people seeing and feeling it on site. So we've really committed to an integrated project management tool. And we do what we do, like we're a general contractor developer. We've about 150 million of work on at the moment. And housing at scale is actually surprisingly difficult to do well. To build a
Yeah,
one-off house is easy. To build 500 of them at the same time is much harder.
yeah,
Because a mistake made once can often be made 20, 30, 50, 500 times, you know?
yeah.
Yeah,
And that just blows it up. It makes it
completely. Yeah,
from a small problem to a very, very, very big
correct.
problem very
Correct.
quickly.
And
Um,
you've got like 32 trades passing through each house, in a very integrated way. So making sure trade sign off is good. You don't start a trade until the other one's finished. All these things are critically important. And
yeah,
those type of tools really help.
yeah, yeah. And if construction system is a game, how early in the project life cycle do you believe clarity should be created? And how much impact could highly visual upfront communication tools have avoiding late stage disputes on variations?
Massive. Like even go back to the simple thing that we do housing, right? And the amount of issues we have with simple things like mechanical layouts, kitchen layouts, where, so all of that could be just avoided. So what we're trying to do is utilize Procore and particularly standardize our approach so that we mitigate coordination issues later on. But moving to like 4D models and other things would absolutely have a huge impact, because people can see, they can see the clashes, they can see actually what they're getting, avoids changes and rework later on. Absolutely huge.
Yeah. And given your emphasis on predictability and commercial discipline, where do you see the construction heading over the next decade, especially as clients demand faster delivery, tighter margins, and that greater transparency?
I think we have to look more at, certainly in the construction industry, modular construction, offsite construction, standardization. It's mind-boggling to me, that you could work for 10 different, county councils or housing associations in Ireland, and every one of them have a different specification. Like a simple thing like that could streamline project delivery incredibly. Certain associations won't take certain types of modular construction. And as an industry, I think standardizing our approach, whether it's housing, whether it's data centers, whether it's this, it's like the iPhone charger versus the Android versus the iPhone charger.
Yeah.
You know, we've only recently streamlined that, but like streamlining how we deliver projects across the board, I think has to be the way the industry has to go, especially as we have more and more resource challenges. It's not going away.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And then just a quick final one. Are you actually looking into modular building and how that's gonna impact? Because I've had a look at modular, and in fact, one of my previous guests is a chap that does modular housing in the States, and he's coming up against a lot of sort of pressure from other sort of people in the industry because modular is quick, well, ish. It's fast. It saves money, and you can build houses extremely quickly in these factories, and then just turn them on site and build rapidly. So is this something that you're actually looking at, and have you come across any friction?
Oh, where do I start? Like, I mean, I've built in 14 countries around the world, right? And, sometimes you think you're a bit of a pioneer for these things. And, like, so I was, in every country that I've built in, right, different regulations and, you've got different registrative bodies when you come in as an alternative method of construction, and you've got to get all the stakeholders on board, like the design teams, the clients who are buying these things, the banks and insurance industry that underwrite them. It's
Yeah,
not easy. And I kind of think at this stage there's always a midpoint, right, between a ready-made house coming out of a factory versus something that can be prefabricated off-site and brought together. So what I'm trying to lean towards now is we use, for example, at the moment, insulated concrete formwork. So um, the design is pre set out. The form or the molds come predominantly pre-formed, so you can erect a house in like 3 days on site.
wow.
The structure. Then your floor joists and your roof joists are prefabricated, and whatever you can prefabricate, we're prefabricating and standardizing. The nice part about it is you don't have huge transportation issues. To build a house in a factory and then transport it is slow, it's expensive, it's limiting. Now, this isn't so much an issue in Ireland, but when I worked in other countries, for example, in Africa, local employment is a huge thing.
Yeah.
Being able to employ people from the local community and get buy-in and engagement. So I, I'm a huge fan of modular, not to the degree where we're taking a finished house out of a factory, although I would love to do that. Um,
Mm.
but something of a hybrid,
Yeah, yeah.
and using standardization, as I mentioned earlier, to simplify that process then.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's all we have time for. Stephen, loved our conversation and on the future where construction is headed. Just before we sign off, if listeners want to get in contact with you, learn about what you offer at BHA Construction, what are the best ways for my listeners to do that?
Yeah, through my LinkedIn profile, Stephen Duggan or sduggan at bhaconstruction.com.
Excellent. And a quick reminder to all the listeners out there, this episode was supported by a PropTech visual platform, changing how forward-thinking developers plan, pitch, and sell. It's not mainstream yet, but it will be. If you want to stay ahead of the curve, you know where to find me. You've been listening to Blueprints to Buildings podcast. I'm your host, Glen Palmer. Today I was joined by Stephen Duggan. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode.